He held the boarding pass between two manicured fingers, looking at her like she was something he'd scraped off the sole of his expensive loafer. The terminal went silent. With a sneer that would haunt his career forever, he didn't just deny her boarding. He ripped the first-class ticket in half, letting the pieces flutter to the dirty carpet. He thought he was protecting the brand from a trespasser. He didn't know he was declaring war on the woman who had just acquired the controlling stake of the entire airline. This is the story of how Greg Sterling's arrogance cost him everything. The air inside Chicago O'Hare's Terminal 3 smelled of stale pretzels, anxiety, and expensive cologne. It was the frantic lull of a Tuesday morning rush, the kind of chaos that Greg Sterling thrived on. Greg adjusted his tie in the reflection of the boarding door glass. He wasn't just a gate agent. He was the regional station manager for Sovereign Air, a carrier that prided itself on being the sky-high club for the elite. Greg took that motto personally. At 45, with hair graying at the temples and a suit that cost more than most of his staff's cars, he viewed himself not as a service provider, but as a gatekeeper. He was the bouncer of the skies. "Listen to me," Greg barked at a trembling junior agent named Sarah. He pointed a finger at the display screen. "I don't care if they have silver status. If they are 1 ounce over the carry-on limit, you gate-check it. We are running a premium operation here, not a Greyhound bus. Do you understand?" "Yes, Mr. Sterling," Sarah whispered, clutching her scanner. "Good. Now fix your scarf. It's crooked." Greg turned away, scanning the crowd. He loved this power. He loved the way passengers avoided his gaze, terrified he might pull them out of line for a random screening. He had a sixth sense for people who didn't belong, or at least he convinced himself he did. That was when he saw her. She was standing near the entrance to the priority lane, the red carpet reserved for first class and diamond medallion members. She looked entirely out of place in Greg's carefully curated world. The girl, she couldn't have been more than 26, was black, with her hair pulled back in a messy, functional bun. She wore an oversized grey hoodie that read Howard University in fading letters, black leggings, and battered white sneakers. On her back was a worn canvas rucksack that looked like it had survived a war zone. She held a phone in one hand and a takeaway coffee cup in the other, looking confusedly at the boarding group monitor. Greg's lip curled. This was exactly the kind of riff-raff that diluted the Sovereign Air brand. He hated when economy passengers tried to sneak into the priority lane to snag overhead bin space. It was a personal insult to his authority. He watched as she took a step toward the red carpet. "Excuse me." Greg's voice boomed. He didn't walk, he marched. He cut through the crowd of businessmen in trench coats and families wrestling with strollers, positioning himself directly in her path like a human barricade. The girl looked up. Her eyes were tired, dark circles prominent against her skin. She blinked, startled by his aggression. "Oh, hi. This is the priority lane," Greg interrupted, his voice dripping with condescension. He didn't ask, he informed. "Economy boarding is Zone 5. You are currently standing in Zone 1. The back of the line is that way." He pointed toward the crowded, chaotic mass of people near the restrooms. The girl, whose name was Maya, shifted her weight. She didn't move. "I know. I'm looking for the scanner. My app isn't loading, so I printed a pass, but if you know, then you should move," Greg snapped. He crossed his arms, puffing out his chest. "We have high-value clients trying to board. You are blocking the flow." Maya frowned, a flicker of irritation crossing her face. "Sir, I'm on this flight. I just need to get to my seat. It's been a long week." "We've all had long weeks," Greg scoffed. He looked her up and down, making a show of inspecting her hoodie. "And usually, Passengers who dress for a slumber party aren't sitting in the front. Let me see your boarding pass." He held out his hand, snapping his fingers impatiently. Maya sighed, reaching into her hoodie pocket. She pulled out a crisp, folded piece of paper. "Here. I just want to sit down and get some sleep." Greg snatched the paper from her hand. He didn't even look at the name. His eyes went straight to the seat assignment. 1A. 1A. The prime seat. The bulkhead window. The seat usually reserved for senators, CEOs, or movie stars. Greg let out a short, incredulous laugh. He looked from the paper to Maya, then back to the paper. 1A. You expect me to believe this is yours?" "It is mine," Maya said, her voice dropping an octave. She wasn't shouting, but the tiredness was being replaced by a steeliness that Greg was too arrogant to notice. "Honey," Greg said, leaning in, his voice loud enough for the surrounding passengers to hear. "I've been in this business for 20 years. I know what a first-class passenger looks like, and they don't look like they just rolled out of a dorm room." A few people in line chuckled. A man in a tailored suit behind Maya checked his watch, sighing loudly. "Come on, let's move it along. Some of us actually have business meetings." "You heard the gentleman," Greg said, smiling smugly at the businessman. He turned back to Maya. "This is clearly a system error, or you swapped passes with someone. This ticket is invalid." "It's not invalid," Maya said, her grip tightening on her coffee cup. "Check the name. Maya Thorne. That's me. Check your manifest." "I don't need to check the manifest to know fraud when I see it," Greg declared. He felt the adrenaline of the performance. He was the hero here, protecting the wealthy elites from the unwashed masses. "Give me my ticket back," Maya said. She stepped forward, extending her hand. "No," Greg said. "In fact," he looked at the boarding pass one last time. Sovereign Air, first class, JFK to LHR. It represented everything he protected, and she represented everything he despised: disorder, informality, youth. "This ticket is confiscated," Greg announced. And then he did the unthinkable. The sound of paper tearing is distinct. It is sharp, final, and violent in a quiet space. "RIP." Greg tore the boarding pass straight down the middle. The entire gate area, previously buzzing with the hum of conversation, went dead silent. Sarah, the junior agent at the desk, covered her mouth with her hand. The businessman who had been complaining about the wait dropped his jaw. Maya stood frozen. She stared at the two halves of the paper in Greg's hands. For a second, she looked confusingly young, like a kid whose toy had been broken by a bully. But then, she looked up, and the expression on her face changed. The fatigue vanished, her posture straightened. The student vanished, replaced by something much colder. "Did you just—" Maya started, her voice dangerously calm. "Did you just destroy my property?" Greg didn't back down. He felt a surge of power. He dropped the pieces of the ticket onto the floor near her scuffed sneakers. "I destroyed a fraudulent document. Now, step aside before I call airport security and have you escorted out of the terminal entirely." "You have no idea what you just done," Maya said softly. "I know exactly what I've done," Greg sneered. He turned to the crowd, addressing the first-class line like a conductor addressing an orchestra. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the delay. Sovereign Air takes the integrity of our premium cabin very seriously. We do not allow unauthorized personnel to disrupt your travel experience. We appreciate your patience." "Authorized personnel," Maya repeated. She reached into her back pocket and pulled out her phone. "I'm going to give you one chance, sir. What is your name?" "My name," Greg said, tapping the gold nameplate on his chest, "is Mr. Sterling, and I am the regional station manager. I run this airport, and you are not recording me." He stepped into her personal space, looming over her. "Put the phone away." "I'm not recording you," Maya said, unlocking her screen. "I'm calling the board of directors." Greg threw his head back and laughed. It was a loud, barking laugh that echoed off the high ceilings. "The board of directors? Did you hear that?" He looked at Sarah at the desk. "She's calling the board. Oh, that is rich. Go ahead, sweetheart. Call the president while you're at it. Tell him Greg Sterling is doing his job." Maya didn't look at him. She tapped a contact on her phone. She didn't scroll. It was in her favorites. "Hello?" "Yes, David," Maya said into the phone. Greg rolled his eyes. "David. Sure. Probably her boyfriend, who works at a Starbucks." "I'm at gate 42, O'Hare," Maya said, her eyes locking onto Greg's. "I'm being denied boarding. The station manager just ripped up my ticket." "Yes." He said, "I don't look like I belong in first class." She paused, listening. Greg crossed his arms, tapping his foot. This performance was becoming tedious. "Are you done? Because security is on speed dial." Maya held up a finger to silence him. "Yes, David." "No. Don't cancel the flight. I need to get to London for the merger signing." "Yes. He's standing right here. His name is Sterling." She lowered the phone. "David wants to speak to you." Greg looked at the phone as if it were a dirty diaper. "I am not speaking to your boyfriend. I have a plane to load." "It's not my boyfriend," Maya said. "It's David Reynolds." Greg froze. The name hung in the air like a lead weight. David Reynolds was the CEO of Sovereign Air. Greg had a poster of him in his office. He had watched his keynotes. He had memorized his corporate strategy memos. "Nice try," Greg stammered, though a bead of sweat prickled on his hairline. "You think I'm stupid enough to believe you have the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar airline on your cell phone? Who is this, really?" "Your dad?" "Take the phone, Mr. Sterling," Maya said. "No." Greg turned to Sarah. "Sarah, call TSA. Tell them we have a belligerent passenger refusing to vacate the gate area." Sarah hesitated. She looked at Maya, then at the phone, then at Greg. "Mr. Sterling, maybe you should just check." "Do not tell me how to do my job," Greg roared, his face turning a blotchy red. He turned back to Maya and slapped the phone out of her hand. It clattered across the linoleum floor, sliding toward the window. The gasp from the crowd was audible. This wasn't just rude, it was assault. Maya looked at her phone, lying face down on the ground. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She slowly walked over, picked it up, and checked the screen. The glass was cracked, a spiderweb fracture running right through the center. She put the phone back to her ear. "David, you still there?" "Yeah." He just knocked the phone out of my hand. "No, I'm okay. But I think we have a serious personnel issue here." "Yes." "Do it." She hung up the phone and slipped it into her pocket. She turned to Greg, her expression unreadable. "You are done," Greg hissed. "Get out of my terminal." "No," Maya said. She walked over to the nearest empty seat in the waiting area, sat down and crossed her legs. "I'll wait." "Wait for what? The police?" "No," Maya said, checking her watch. "For you to be fired. It should take about 3 minutes." Greg laughed again, but this time it sounded hollow. He turned to the passengers. "All right, folks, show's over. First class. Please step forward for boarding." He reached for the scanner to begin the process, but the machine let out a loud, angry beep. The screen flashed red. "System lockdown." Greg frowned. He typed in his override code. "Access denied." "Sarah, what did you do?" Greg snapped. "I didn't do anything," Sarah cried, typing frantically on her terminal. "My screen is locked too. It says, It says Administrative Override, Level 10. Greg's blood ran cold. Level 10 wasn't the station manager. It wasn't the regional director. Level 10 was corporate headquarters. It was the God mode of the airline's mainframe. The PA system chimed. Usually it was a pre-recorded voice. This time there was a crackle of static, and a voice that Greg recognized instantly, a voice he had heard on quarterly Zoom town halls for the last 5 years, boomed through the speakers of Gate 42. "Attention passengers at Gate 42, the voice said. It was deep, calm, and terrifyingly familiar. "This is David Reynolds, CEO of Sovereign Air. I need everyone to pause boarding immediately." The color drained from Greg Sterling's face so fast he looked like a corpse. "I am looking for an employee named Gregory Sterling," the voice continued. "Mr. Sterling, if you can hear me, please look at the gate camera." Greg slowly turned his head toward the small black dome camera mounted above the jet bridge door. "Mr. Sterling," the CEO's voice echoed, "please hand the public address microphone to the woman you just assaulted, Ms. Maya Thorne." Greg's hands shook so badly he dropped the scanner. The entire gate area turned to look at Maya. She stood up slowly, smoothed out her Howard University hoodie, and walked toward the desk. "Mr. Sterling," Maya said, holding out her hand. "The mic." Greg couldn't move. He was paralyzed by a cocktail of fear and disbelief. Sarah, thinking quickly, grabbed the microphone from the counter and handed it to Maya. Maya took the mic. She didn't look triumphant. She looked professional. "David, I'm here," she said, her voice amplified throughout the terminal. "Maya, I am so sorry," the CEO's voice replied. "The board is watching the feed. We are mortified. Are you injured?" "I'm fine, David, but my phone is broken, and my ticket is in pieces on the floor." "We will handle it," David said. "Maya, do you want to tell him, or should I?" Maya looked at Greg. He was sweating profusely, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "Mr. Sterling," Maya said, her voice ringing clear. "You assumed I couldn't afford a first-class ticket because of how I dress. You assumed I was nobody." She paused, letting the silence stretch. "My full name is Maya Thorne Pendergrass. My grandfather was Harrison Pendergrass." A ripple of murmurs went through the older businessmen in the crowd. Harrison Pendergrass was a legend, an industrial titan, one of the wealthiest men in Chicago history. "My grandfather passed away last week," Maya continued. "I didn't just inherit his money. I inherited his investment portfolio, which includes a 40% controlling stake in Sovereign Air." She took a step closer to Greg, whose knees were actually knocking together. "I'm not just a passenger, Mr. Sterling. As of this morning's probate hearing, I am your boss's boss." Greg made a sound that was half whimper, half gag. "And," Maya added, "I was flying to London to sign the papers that would have secured the pension funds for all airline employees. I wanted to fly commercial to see how the staff treats regular people. I guess I found out." She turned back to the microphone. "David?" "I'm here, Maya." "Fire him." The words hung in the air. "Done," David said. "Mr. Sterling, you are terminated effective immediately for gross misconduct, assault, and discrimination. Please surrender your badge and leave the secure area. Security is on the way to escort you." The crowd erupted. It wasn't polite applause, it was a roar of approval. The businessman who had complained earlier actually clapped. But the drama wasn't over. As Greg stood there, stripped of his power, his face pale, he did the only thing a man with an ego that size could do when cornered. He doubled down. "You can't do this!" Greg screamed, lunging toward the counter. "I have union rights. I have tenure. You're lying. This is a prank." He reached for Maya, His face twisted in rage. That was when the real karma hit. The space between the check-in counter and the waiting area was only about 5 feet, but as Greg Sterling lunged across it, that distance seemed to stretch into slow motion. His face was a mask of contorted fury, the veins in his neck bulging against his starch-stiff collar. He wasn't just a manager losing his job. He was a man watching his entire identity disintegrate, and his instinct was to destroy the mirror that reflected his failure. "You liar!" he screamed, his hands hooked into claws reaching for Maya's hoodie. But he never made contact. Before Greg could reach her, a heavy blur of navy wool stepped in. It was the businessman from the line, the one Greg had mocked earlier for checking his watch. The man whose name was Thomas Kincaid, a former linebacker turned corporate attorney, didn't throw a punch. He simply dropped his shoulder and checked Greg Sterling with the immovable solidity of a brick wall. The impact was sickeningly loud. Greg bounced off Kincaid's chest and stumbled backward, his polished loafers losing traction on the linoleum. He flailed, his arms windmills of desperation, before crashing heavily into the metal stanchions of the boarding lane. The velvet ropes tangled around his legs, bringing him down in a heap of synthetic velvet and chrome. "Stay down," Kincaid said, his voice low and devoid of humor. He adjusted his suit jacket, not even looking out of breath. "You touch her, and you're looking at a felony battery charge on top of everything else." Maya hadn't flinched. She stood completely still, watching Greg struggle to untangle himself from the ropes he had used to separate the elite from the commoners. The irony was visual and visceral. He was now trapped by the very barriers he had used to exclude others. "Security!" Sarah, the junior agent, shrieked, finally breaking her paralysis. She grabbed the radio from the desk, her hands trembling. "Code red at gate 42. Passenger assault. No, staff assault on a passenger. We need immediate assistance." The atmosphere in the terminal shifted from shock to a frenzy of documentation. It was the sound of the modern age, the collective click-beep of 100 smartphones recording simultaneously. Greg Sterling was no longer a person. He was content. He was a viral moment in the making. Greg scrambled to his knees, his expensive suit jacket torn at the shoulder seam. He looked up, wild-eyed. He saw the wall of phones. He saw the faces of the passengers he had sneered at for years. There was no sympathy in their eyes, only a hungry curiosity. "Stop filming," Greg rasped, shielding his face with a shaking hand. "You don't have the right. This is a private operational matter." "It's a public terminal, Greg," Maya said. Her voice was quiet, but in the hush of the gate area, it carried like a bell. She took a step toward him, not in aggression, but in observation. She looked down at him with an expression that hurt more than anger. Pity. "You look so small down there." "You set me up," Greg spat, trying to stand but slipping again. "You came here dressed like trash on purpose. You wanted this to happen." "I dressed for comfort," Maya corrected him calmly. "You supplied the prejudice. That was all you." 3 Transportation Security Administration, TSA officers, and 2 Chicago Police Department officers burst through the perimeter, pushing through the crowd. The heavy clatter of their equipment belts broke the tension. "Back up! Everyone back up!" the lead officer shouted, his hand resting on his taser. "He attacked her!" a woman in the crowd shouted, pointing a manicured finger at Greg. "He shredded her ticket and smashed her phone, then he tried to hit her." "I have video!" a teenager in a Supreme t-shirt yelled, waving his iPhone. "I got the whole thing in 4K. The police officers didn't hesitate. They had seen the chaos, heard the accusations, and saw the man on the floor tangled in velvet ropes, looking manic. "Sir, stay on the ground," the officer commanded, moving in on Greg. "I am the station manager," Greg howled, his voice cracking. "I am in charge of this facility. You should be arresting her. She's a fraud." "Sir, put your hands behind your back," the officer said, pulling Greg's arms back with practiced indifference. The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting shut was the final nail in the coffin of Greg's career. Click, click, click! Greg went rigid. The cold steel on his wrists seemed to short-circuit his brain. He stopped screaming. He stared blankly at the chewing gum stains on the carpet, his breath coming in shallow, hyperventilating gasps. As they hoisted him to his feet, Sarah walked out from behind the podium. She held something in her hand. It was Greg's access badge, the one that gave him entry to the jet bridges, the tarmac, and the VIP lounges. "Mr. Sterling," Sarah said, her voice shaking but determined. "Mr. Reynolds just messaged the station comms. He said to secure the assets." She reached out and unclipped the badge from his lapel. Greg looked at her, his eyes wet. "Sarah, I hired you. I trained you. You bullied me," Sarah whispered, clutching the badge to her chest. "Every single day." The police began to march Greg away. This was the walk of shame, a procession through the heart of Terminal 3. As he was led past the lines of passengers, people waiting for flights to Denver, to Miami, to London, the crowd parted. There were no jeers, just a heavy, judgmental silence. Greg Sterling, the man who believed he was the gatekeeper of the sky, was being dragged away like common cargo. Maya watched him go until he disappeared around the corner toward the security exit. She didn't smile. She didn't cheer. She felt a heavy weight settle in her stomach. It was the weight of realization. Her grandfather's company, the legacy she was now responsible for, had allowed a man like that to thrive for 20 years. "Ms. Thorne?" Maya turned. Sarah was standing there, holding the two torn halves of the boarding pass. She had taped them together with clear Scotch tape. It was a crude, jagged repair job, but the barcode was visible. I fixed it," Sarah said, offering the paper with both hands. "I mean, I can print you a new one, obviously. But I thought, maybe you wanted this one." Maya took the taped ticket. She ran her thumb over the tear. "Thank you, Sarah," Maya said softly. "What's your last name?" "Bennett, Mom." "Sarah Bennett," Maya repeated, memorizing it. "You handled the counter alone while your manager had a meltdown. You prioritized passenger safety. I won't forget that." Sarah flushed pink. "The plane is ready for you, Ms. Thorne. Captain Miller has requested to greet you personally at the door." Maya looked at the gate door. The bridge to the plane was open. The path was clear. But the energy in the room had changed. She wasn't just a passenger anymore. She was the owner, and everyone knew it. The holding cell at O'Hare Airport is a place very few people know exists. It is tucked away in the sub-basement of the international terminal, far from the duty-free shops and the champagne bars. It is a room of cinder blocks, painted a depressing shade of institutional beige, lit by a buzzing fluorescent strip that flickers incessantly. It smells of industrial cleaner and stale sweat. Greg Sterling sat on the metal bench, his hand still cuffed in front of him. The silence here was different from the silence at the gate. It was oppressive. It was the silence of a tomb. For the first 20 minutes, Greg had sat in a state of shock. Now the shock was wearing off, replaced by a cold, creeping horror. The door buzzed and opened. A tired-looking police sergeant walked in, carrying a clipboard and a clear plastic bag containing Greg's personal effects, his wallet, his keys, and his Rolex. "You have the right to one call," the sergeant said, sliding a landline phone through a slot in the bars. "Make it count." Greg's hands shook as he picked up the receiver. Who to call? His wife? No. She was at her sister's in Wisconsin. She would just scream. His lawyer. He didn't have a criminal lawyer. He had a guy who helped him with his estate planning. He dialed the number for the union representative for airline management, a man named Carl who Greg had drank scotch with at the last 3 Christmas parties. Carl would fix this. Carl knew the rules. You couldn't just fire a 20-year veteran over a misunderstanding. The phone rang. Once. Twice. "This is Carl." "Carl, it's Greg. Greg Sterling." Greg's voice rushed out, desperate and wet. "Listen to me, they've completely lost their minds here. Reynolds fired me over the PA. Can you believe that? Illegal termination. I'm in the airport lockup. You need to get down here and file a grievance immediately." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Greg," Carl's voice was cold, distant. "I can't help you." "What do you mean you can't help me? I pay my dues. I'm a station manager." "Have you seen Twitter, Greg?" Greg blinked. "What?" "You're trending," Carl said, and he sounded disgusted. #1 in the United States, #3 worldwide. The video has 4 million views in 20 minutes. Airline manager attacks student. They're calling you the O'Hare ogre." "It's out of context," Greg shouted. "It's not out of context," Carl snapped. "I watched it. You shredded a first-class ticket because you didn't like how she dressed. You smashed her phone, and then you tried to choke the majority shareholder of the company. I didn't know who she was." "It doesn't matter who she was," Carl roared, losing his composure. "That's the point, Greg. You treated a passenger like garbage because you thought you could get away with it. The union isn't touching this. We issued a statement 5 minutes ago condemning your actions and supporting the CEO's decision." You issued a statement," Greg whispered. "Don't call this number again. You're on your own." Click. The dial tone hummed in Greg's ear. He slowly lowered the phone. He looked at the reflection in the safety glass. He saw a middle-aged man in a torn suit, with grey hair and fear in his eyes. He realized for the first time in his life that his suit, his title, and his arrogance were not armor. They were costumes, and he had just been stripped naked. 30,000 feet above him, the atmosphere was very different. Sovereign Air Flight 901 to London Heathrow had reached cruising altitude. The seatbelt sign pinged off. Maya Thorne sat in seat 1A. It was a private suite, enclosed by sliding privacy doors, upholstered in cream-colored leather that smelled of lavender and money. To her right, a crystal flute of vintage Dom Perignon sat on a linen coaster, the bubbles rising in perfect golden chains. She hadn't taken a sip. She was staring out the window at the clouds, her mind racing. The adrenaline of the confrontation had faded, leaving behind a deep exhaustion. "Miss Thorne?" Maya turned. The purser, a woman named Elena with immaculate hair and kind eyes, was kneeling by her seat. She held a silver tray with a warm towel. "I just wanted to check on you," Elena said, her voice hushed. "Captain Miller asked me to let you know that we have enabled the satellite Wi-Fi for you. Complimentary, of course. And we have a replacement phone for you. It's an onboard spare we keep for emergencies. It's not much, but you can make calls." Maya took the warm towel and wiped her hands. She felt the grime of the airport, the touch of the dirty floor where she had picked up her ticket, wiping away. "Thank you, Elena," Maya said. "Please don't treat me like a porcelain doll. I'm okay." Elena hesitated, then lowered her professional mask for a second. "Can I just say, we heard what happened. The crew. We all heard the PA announcement." Maya braced herself. She expected resentment. She expected them to be angry that she had caused a scene and delayed the flight. "We were cheering in the galley," Elena whispered, a fierce glint in her eyes. "Greg Sterling wrote me up 3 months ago because my shoes were too matte. He terrorized this base for a decade. What you did, You didn't just stand up for yourself. You took out the trash. Maya looked at the flight attendant, really looked at her. She saw the fatigue around Eleanor's eyes, the tension in her shoulders. Is it bad? Maya asked. The culture. It's fear-based, Elena admitted, glancing toward the cockpit to make sure she wasn't overheard. Mr. Pendergrass, your grandfather, he was a brilliant man, but he was distant in his final years. He let the sharks like Sterling run the operational side. They squeezed us. They focused on exclusive branding instead of human decency. We've been waiting for someone to notice. Maya nodded slowly. She looked at the champagne, then back to Elena. Take this away, please, Maya said, gesturing to the glass. Oh, is it not chilled enough? I can— No, Maya said. I don't want champagne. I want coffee. Black. In a paper cup, if you have one. Elena smiled, a genuine smile this time. I can do that. When Elena left, Maya picked up the spare phone. She connected to the Wi-Fi. Her notifications were blown out. Thousands of emails, texts from friends she hadn't spoken to in years, and news alerts. IRS goes undercover? Sovereign Air majority owner, harassed at O'Hare. Greg Sterling fired. The end of the bully era at Sovereign. She ignored the headlines and opened her email app. She composed a new message. To David Reynolds, CEO, Board of Directors, from Maya Thorne Pendergrass. Subject, Flight 901, immediate strategic review. David, I am currently airborne. The situation at the gate was not an isolated incident. It was a symptom. Greg Sterling felt comfortable acting that way because the company culture rewarded arrogance over service. We are not just firing him. We are auditing the entire management training program. I want a review of all passenger complaints from the last 5 years that were dismissed by station managers. I want to know how many other people were turned away, humiliated, or mistreated because they didn't look the part. Sovereign Air is no longer about exclusion. It's about aviation. If we can't treat a girl in a hoodie with respect, we don't deserve the man in the suit. I will see you in London. Have the legal team ready. We have work to do. Maya. She hit send. She reclined the seat, the leather humming softly as it adjusted to her body. She closed her eyes. She thought about her grandfather, Harrison. He had started this airline with one crop duster and a dream to connect people. He used to say, "The sky belongs to everyone, Maya. Gravity doesn't discriminate, and neither should we." Somewhere along the way, the company had forgotten that. Maya opened her eyes and looked at the taped-up boarding pass she had placed on the tray table. The tear down the middle was a scar. "Okay, Grandpa," she whispered to the empty cabin. "Let's fix this." The plane banked left, turning toward the Atlantic, leaving the chaos of Chicago and Greg Sterling in his cage far behind. But as Maya closed her eyes to sleep, she didn't know that Greg wasn't just sitting in his cell feeling sorry for himself. In the dark of the holding cell, Greg had remembered something. He had remembered a name, not a friend, but a lever. A piece of information he had stored away years ago about the Pendergrass family trust, a secret that even Maya didn't know. He stood up and went to the bars. "Officer!" Greg shouted, his voice raspy but manic again. "Officer, I need to make a deal. I have information on federal fraud involving the Pendergrass estate. Get me the FBI." The karma had hit, but the war was just beginning. The interrogation room at the O'Hare precinct was smaller than the holding cell, but it felt infinitely colder. The walls were lined with acoustic foam that had turned yellow with age, absorbing sound so completely that Greg Sterling could hear the blood rushing in his own ears. Across the metal table sat Agent Cole from the FBI's white-collar crime division. He hadn't come because he believed Greg. He had come because, when a man who just ran a major airline hub screams federal fraud loud enough, the Bureau is obligated to listen. Agent Cole was a man of few movements. He sat perfectly still, his eyes fixed on Greg. He didn't take notes. He just watched. "Mr. Sterling," Cole said, his voice dry as sandpaper. "You are currently facing charges for assault, battery, and disturbing the peace. You have been fired publicly. Your pension is likely gone. From where I'm sitting, you look like a man willing to say anything to burn down the house that kicked you out." Greg leaned forward. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a frantic, sweaty intensity. He looked like a cornered rat baring its teeth. "You think this is revenge?" Greg whispered. "Sure, I hate them. I hate that girl. But that doesn't make me a liar." "You mentioned the Pendergrass Trust," Cole said, tapping the table. "You said there was material misrepresentation in the merger documents. That is a heavy accusation. Maya Thorne is currently in London to sign those papers." "Harrison Pendergrass was a legend, right?" Greg's eyes widened, a manic gleam appearing. The godfather of aviation. Everyone loved him. But Harrison was old, and in the last 2 years he was desperate to secure this merger with British Sovereign to save the company from bankruptcy. Greg paused for effect, licking his dry lips. "I was the station manager at the hub. I saw things the board didn't see. I saw the maintenance logs for the 787 fleet." Agent Cole's expression didn't change, but his posture stiffened slightly. "Go on." "We had 3 aircraft with micro-fractures in the turbine blades," Greg said, the words spilling out fast now. "Standard procedure is to ground them. Immediate overhaul. Costs millions. Disruptive to the schedule. Harrison knew about it. I sent the memos up the chain myself." And the memos disappeared. Greg smiled, a cruel, satisfied twist of his lips. The planes kept flying. The records were altered to show routine inspection passed. If that merger goes through tomorrow, the British partners are buying a fleet of ticking time bombs. And Maya Thorne? She just inherited the controlling stake. If she signs those papers knowing, or should have known, about the safety bypass, she's committing international securities fraud. Agent Cole finally took out a pen. "Do you have proof?" "The memos?" "I kept copies," Greg whispered. "Digital copies, encrypted, on a cloud server. I can give you the key. But I want full immunity, and I want to see her face when you slap the cuffs on her." Agent Cole stared at him for a long moment. He saw the malice in Greg's eyes, the sheer pettiness of a man who would risk passenger safety for years just to keep his job, and who was now revealing it only to destroy a young woman. "If you are telling the truth, Mr. Sterling, you are admitting to being an accessory to a felony," Cole said. "I was following orders." Greg slammed his hand on the table, the sound deadened by the foam. "I was a good soldier, but she humiliated me. She treated me like I was the problem. Now I'm the whistleblower." Cole stood up. He picked up his phone. "I need to make a call to London. Scotland Yard needs to intercept Ms. Thorne before she enters the Sovereign headquarters." Greg leaned back in his chair. For the first time in 6 hours he smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who had pulled the pin on a grenade and was content to blow himself up as long as his enemy died too. Meanwhile, 3,000 miles away, the atmosphere was thick with a different kind of tension. Maya Thorne stepped off the Gulfstream GS850 that Sovereign Air had chartered to scramble her to London after the incident. The Heathrow tarmac was grey and wet, a drizzle falling that chilled her to the bone. She wasn't wearing the hoodie anymore. She had changed on the plane into a black bespoke suit that had belonged to her mother. It was sharp, tailored, and severe. She wore her hair in a tight coil at the base of her neck. She looked every inch the heiress, but inside she felt like an imposter. "Ms. Thorne," a British security officer said, opening the door of a waiting black Range Rover. "We have a secure route to the city. The press is swarming the front entrance of the HQ." "Let them swarm," Maya said, her voice steady despite the shaking of her hands. "I have nothing to hide." She climbed into the car. Next to her sat David Reynolds, the CEO. David looked aged. The stress of the last 12 hours, the viral video, the firing of Sterling, the stock market volatility, had etched deep lines into his face. "Maya," David said, as the car pulled away, the rain streaking the tinted windows. "You need to be prepared for the board. Lord Blackwood is old-fashioned. He doesn't care about the moral victory you won in Chicago. He cares that our stock dipped 4% because the owner got into a fight at an airport." "I didn't get into a fight, David," Maya said, looking out at the blurring lights of the M4 motorway. "I was assaulted by your employee. I know that. You know that. The public knows that." David sighed, rubbing his temples. "But Blackwood sees it as instability. He's going to try to push for a vote of no confidence. He wants to strip you of your voting rights on the board. He wants to make you a silent partner." Maya turned to him. "He wants to silence me. He thinks you're a liability. He thinks you're a girl from the street who got lucky with a probate will. He doesn't know you, Maya. He doesn't know you have an MBA from Wharton. He doesn't know you spent your summers working the baggage ramp." "I never told anyone about the baggage ramp," Maya said softly. "I didn't want special treatment." "Well," David said, grimly checking his phone, "you're going to need to tell them now, because when we walk into that boardroom, they are going to try to eat you alive." Maya looked down at her phone. The screen was cracked. The replacement phone she'd been given on the plane was an older model, and the screen protector was peeling. It felt like a metaphor for her life right now, holding together, but barely. She saw a text from Sarah Bennett, the gate agent. "Ms. Thorne, I hope you landed safely. The staff here, we're all wearing our ribbons upside down today, in solidarity. You gave us hope." Maya closed her eyes. She wasn't doing this for the stock price. She wasn't doing it for the money. She was doing it for Sarah, for Elena, for the thousands of people who made the airline run while men like Greg Sterling and Lord Blackwood drank scotch in leather chairs. "Let them try to eat me," Maya whispered, opening her eyes. They were hard as flint. "I'm not the main course. I'm the chef." The boardroom of Sovereign Air's European headquarters was a cavernous space designed to intimidate. Located on the 40th floor of the Shard, it offered a panoramic view of London, but the 12 men sitting around the 30-foot mahogany table weren't interested in the view. They were interested in blood. At the head of the table sat Lord Alistair Blackwood. He was 70 years old, with eyes that held absolutely no warmth. He checked his watch as the double doors swung open. Maya walked in, flanked by David Reynolds. She had traded her hoodie for a sharp, tailored black suit, but she carried her battered rucksack over one shoulder. The room did not stand. The silence was heavy, filled only by the hum of the air conditioning. Maya walked to the empty chair at the opposite end of the table. She didn't sit immediately. She swung her rucksack off her shoulder and dropped it onto the pristine mahogany table. Thud. Lord Blackwood stared at the bag with distaste. "Ms. Thorne, you are late. Punctuality is the courtesy of kings." "And patience is the virtue of wisdom, Lord Blackwood," Maya replied, her voice projecting clearly. "My flight was delayed. I was busy cleaning up a mess your management culture created." A mess you created, a board member named Simon interjected. Greg Sterling was our top-performing station manager. You provoked a scene that cost us $4 million in bad PR. If our stock drops because a manager assaults a passenger for wearing a hoodie, the problem isn't the passenger, Simon. It's the manager, Maya shot back, taking her seat. Enough rhetoric, Blackwood snapped. He slid a black leather folder across the long table. It stopped inches from Maya's hand. What is this? Maya asked. A voluntary recusal, Blackwood said, a shark-like smile touching his lips. Given your emotional instability demonstrated in Chicago, the board has drafted a motion. You will sign over your voting proxy to us for 5 years. You retain your dividends, but you leave the flying to the adults. The room held its breath. David Reynolds looked at Maya, his face pale. He knew that if she signed, the company was lost. Maya opened the folder. She looked at the document, then closed it. No, she said softly. Excuse me? I said no. My grandfather built this company on service, not exclusion. I am not stepping back. I am stepping up. As of this moment, I am initiating a full external audit of all regional management. You can't do that, Simon shouted. I own 51% of the voting stock, Maya said, her voice rising. I can do whatever I please, and if you don't like it, you can resign. For a moment, Maya looked invincible. She was the storm. She was the future. And then the doors burst open. It wasn't coffee service. It was 4 officers from the Metropolitan Police, flanked by Agent Cole of the FBI. What is the meaning of this? Blackwood demanded, standing up. Agent Cole ignored him, walking straight toward Maya. Maya Thorne Pendergrass. Yes? Maya felt her stomach drop. I am Agent Cole, FBI. We have a warrant to seize all electronic devices and documents in your possession regarding the Pendergrass estate. On what grounds? David Reynolds demanded, stepping between them. Securities fraud and conspiracy to endanger public safety, Cole recited coldly. A credible witness, Mr. Gregory Sterling, has provided evidence that your grandfather, Harrison Pendergrass, falsified maintenance records for the 787 fleet to inflate the company's value. He claims you, as executrix, are concealing this data. The room erupted in gasps. That's a lie, Maya said, her voice shaking. My grandfather would never. The records exist, Ms. Thorne. Sterling provided the digital logs, Cole said. Until we determine your involvement, the assets of the Pendergrass Trust are frozen. Lord Blackwood looked from the agents to Maya, his eyes widening with opportunistic glee. Fraud? Well then. He turned to the board. It appears the majority shareholder is part of a criminal investigation. I move that the board immediately suspends Miss Thorne's voting rights, pending the outcome. Seconded, Simon said instantly. All in favor? Every hand in the room went up. Motion carried, Blackwood said, pointing to the door. Escort her out, officers, and take the bag. Agent Cole reached for Maya's rucksack, the bag that held her laptop and her grandfather's journals. Maya stood there, stripped of her power in seconds. Greg Sterling, from his jail cell, had launched a nuclear missile into the heart of London. He had framed her grandfather to save himself. But as the officer took her arm, Maya's eyes locked onto a portrait of Harrison Pendergrass on the wall. The records, she thought. Greg said he has records. Greg Sterling was arrogant. He was sloppy. But Harrison Pendergrass? He was paranoid. He recorded everything. If Greg had changed the logs, Harrison would have had a backup. As she was led out of the boardroom in disgrace, flashed by cameras in the lobby, Maya didn't cry. She started calculating. She wasn't going to jail. She was going to find the real black box. 48 hours after being escorted out of the Shard, Maya sat in a sterile conference room at Scotland Yard. Across from her were Agent Cole and a team of forensic accountants. "We cracked the encryption on the files Sterling provided," Cole said, looking exhausted. He was right about one thing. The maintenance on the 787 fleet was skipped. The logs were falsified. Maya's heart hammered. So my grandfather knew. "That's what Sterling claimed," Cole said, sliding a laptop around. "Sterling told us he was ordered to cut costs to save the company. But we followed the money." Maya looked at the screen. It was a flow chart of the maintenance budget. "The funds were released by corporate," the accountant explained. "Millions of dollars for turbine blades. But they never went to the manufacturer. They were diverted into a shell company called GS Logistics in the Cayman Islands." Maya gasped. "GS Greg Sterling?" "Exactly," Cole said, a grim smile forming. "Sterling didn't skip maintenance to save the airline money. He skipped it to steal the budget. He embezzled $12 million over 5 years. He didn't come forward to blow the whistle. He came forward to frame a dead man for his own crime, hoping we wouldn't look at the bank transfers." The realization hit the room like a thunderclap. Greg Sterling had been so blinded by his hatred for Maya that he had handed the FBI the roadmap to his own life sentence. The fallout. The raid on Lord Blackwood's office happened an hour later. The board was dissolved for gross negligence. Blackwood was forced into an early, humiliating retirement. But the sweetest moment came in the Chicago holding cell. Greg Sterling was waiting for his lawyer, expecting a deal. Instead, Agent Cole walked in, flanked by 2 marshals. "Am I free?" Greg asked, standing up. "Did you arrest her?" "We found the Cayman accounts, Greg," Cole said simply. Greg's face turned the color of ash. He slumped back onto the bench, his mouth opening and closing silently. There was no screaming this time, just the crushing weight of reality. He wasn't the victim. He wasn't the hero. He was just a thief who got caught because he couldn't let a black girl sit in first class. The new era won. Month later, Maya stood at the entrance of Sovereign Air's new headquarters. She wasn't wearing a suit. She was wearing her jeans and a fresh Howard University hoodie. She walked up to the reception desk. The new receptionist, a young man, smiled warmly. "Good morning. Welcome to Sovereign. How can I help you?" he asked, not knowing who she was. Maya smiled back. "Just checking in." She looked up at the wall. The portrait of the old board was gone. In its place was a large mural of the sky with a new motto painted in gold: "Respect is the first-class experience." Maya Thorne had cleaned the house, and for the first time in years the skies were clear. Greg Sterling thought he held the keys to the kingdom, but his arrogance blinded him to the truth. Power isn't about who shouts the loudest, but who acts with integrity. In trying to destroy Maya to save his own ego, he exposed his own crimes and toppled a corrupt empire. Maya didn't just inherit an airline. She earned it by proving that dignity is the only currency that matters. It's a powerful reminder that when you dig a grave for someone else, you usually fall in it yourself. Wow, what a journey. If you felt the satisfaction of that karma hitting Greg Sterling, hit that like button right now. It really helps the channel. Did you think Maya handled the boardroom scene well? Let me know in the comments below. Would you have signed the papers or fought back? Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story. I have another incredible drama coming up next week about a CEO who went undercover as a janitor and found out his wife was planning a hostile takeover. You won't want to miss it. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.